Hello, everybody. This is Don Woolley coming to you from Sahuarita, Arizona. We pronounce it both ways. And we're bringing you an update from the Tea Party Patriots. And also this week, we have a really special guest, a constitutional scholar. His name is Jeff Utsch. Jeff has been down to this area twice to speak to the Sahuarita Tea Party meetings, and at least twice, I'm sure of. And he's going to talk to us tonight about some constitutional things and introduce you all to his group, and also a little bit about himself. So. Anyway, let's get on with some of the Tea Party Patriots news for the week. And I want you to know that they're in their weekly wrap-up this week, they still have a call to action to say no to the red flag laws. If you've been following any of the news, there's a lot of talking about red flag laws, and Governor Doug Ducey is pushing red flag laws and wants something in the next legislative session in Arizona, which would be next January, so this coming January. So keep the pressure on the Senate. Keep writing them. Keep getting the word out. Call them, write them. We went on to their Kirsten Sinema's website and Martha McSally, their Senate website, and use that tool there to send them a letter that was drafted by the Tea Party Patriots, and we signed our name to it and sent that to them. So, and you can do the same. So, or write something from your heart. It came from them, but it was from our heart. So, keep putting the pressure on them. The Senate's where all this is going to take place. The House is. It's pretty much a done deal, whatever they do, and they'll do something crazy, you can bet on that. They're after confiscation of guns, there's no doubt about it. So anyway, let's move on to the September anniversary information. They have confirmed a White House briefing, and they're taking names now to join them at the White House to get the briefing. They've asked for Vice President Pence or President Trump to speak to him, but that remains to be seen. They won't know for sure until the Friday before. So the reception is Thursday night, September 19th, in one of the Senate office buildings, and the White House briefing is Friday, September 20th from 11:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. And there's going to be a training session. It'll be conducted at the Heritage Foundation's auditorium. So that'll be great. Also, there's some hotel information on the Tea Party Patriots anniversary website, which is teaparty10, the number 10, 10.com, teaparty10.com. And that answers a lot of questions about information. Travel, they say, they suggest you fly in Wednesday night and leave Friday evening at the earliest. There's also t-shirts available sold on the Tea Party Patriots Action Store. And I'm listening to the rainfall outside, so the weather people were right for one of the rare times this summer. It is raining outside. So other news and information. So with the media and tech companies trying their hardest to keep conservatives and our ideas out of the spotlight, it's important to make sure we are working as hard as we can to inject Tea Party values into the national conversation. So we need to support President Trump's new immigration rule. Jenny Beth was on Fox News. There's a link on this latest message, and I'll send this out in the Google group to everybody. There's also a link to an op-ed published by activists Don and Patty Woolley, so we appreciate Jenny Beth doing that. Second Amendment how-to guide You can download Take Action, Socialism Story from Oscar Arizia, Mark Levin's new book, and Gary Severino and Molly Hemingway wrote a new book. And there are links to those books on this upcoming message that I'll get to you folks after this show tonight. Last week's blog post, Jenny Beth journaled, "The Tea Party isn't going anywhere," in response to a comment by Rand Paul. There's on the blog, they're talking about Bernie Sanders' criminal justice reform plan is socialism in disguise. Government bureaucracy financially ruins Baltimore City. Hong Kong is a reminder of why our own rights matter. Why red flag laws should raise red flags for gun owners. And of course, the left wants the government to control the banks. And we'll tell you again about the tool to battle social media platforms and their censorship of conservatives. There's a White House launch tool. There's a link to that in this message also, that you can write about your story if you've been kicked off Twitter or Facebook for any period of time, and it's possible. There's a lot of that going on. What else we got going on here? So I think that's about it from the Tea Party Patriots. Again, I'll send this message out to you all right after this program. And again, we thank Jenny Beth Martin for noting our action in this email. It's really kind of her. She's a very hard worker, and we respect her very much. So anyway, let's see. It's about I got 4:51, so I'm going to talk a little bit now about. I'm going to switch over here to. This is the Jeff Utsch's website, Heirs of the Republic, and a lot of interesting information on here. You note that Jeff is noted as a constitutional scholar and speaker, and every year he has a Freedom Expo, and he told me the other day on the phone that this next Freedom Expo is going to be up in Phoenix, first week in March, and he's going to give you more details about that when he comes on. And I'm sure that it'll be a great show. He's hooked up with the Navy SEALs. You know, he trains them. Goes back. He was just back in Virginia Beach. He said for 2 weeks. Jeff was an outstanding swimmer at the University of Arizona, so he takes those skills and shares them with the Navy SEALs. So, the website address is heirstotherepublic.com, www.heirstotherepublic.com. So you can go there and check that out. And he has also has a website that's just jeffutsch.com. It's Jeff, U-T-S-C-H, jeffutsch.com. So, okay, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll give Jeff a call, and we'll get into talking about the Constitution, because he is an authority. So let's take a break, and we'll see you in a few minutes. You hear the rain out here. Hi everybody, we're back, and I'm going to give Jeff Utsch a call now. We'll get him on the platform now, and we'll be interviewing him in a couple of minutes. So just stand by with me. Hey, hi Jeff.
Don, can you see me?
I see you fine. How about you?
Awesome. Yes, sir.
You hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Let me get you up on the screen here and give me about 30 seconds.
Great.
And there you be. I've got you up on the screen with says Jeff Utsch, and I've got your website URL up there underneath your name. So we're cooking here, guy.
Awesome. Thank you.
So you got rain up there?
We have a little.
Yeah.
It's kind of getting cloudy, but nothing stormy. I mean, not a storm yet, but we'll take what we can get.
That's right. Yeah, it's been a dry summer here, especially down here. It just started here. So anyway, I gave you a brief introduction already to the folks, and told them a little bit about Heirs of the Republic. But I'd like you to kind of introduce that, tell them all about it, get into your Freedom Expo information, and then after that we'll start talking Constitution. How's that sound?
Sounds awesome.
Okay, so you go ahead.
Okay, well, Jeff Utsch, as Don has said, founder of Heirs of the Republic Educational Foundation. And we really, our whole message and purpose is to preserve the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. And we kind of believe, as Jefferson said, that you can't be a free and ignorant people at the same time. And so through education, we think that's the best way to be able to preserve the blessings of liberty. And kind of believe in Davy Crockett's saying, make sure you are always correct, which is hard to do. None of us are always correct. But that was what he said at the preamble of his book. Still, I think, the greatest autobiography ever written. Davy Crockett, make sure you are always correct, then go ahead. So as our moms tell us, think before you act, instead of emotionally knee-jerking on every issue that comes before you from CNN or whatever news outlet you may watch. We probably ought to be able to study the issue and think about it and become educated before we have a very high opinion of the direction we should go, and start being high-minded and opinionated as to those things. So, think before you act. That's really what we do at Heirs of the Republic. One of our big goals is to build an American Heritage Center in Arizona. We'd love to do it in southern Arizona. We feel that people in the states west of the Mississippi don't get as much of the history. I was born and raised on the East Coast, Virginia, so I got to see Yorktown, Jamestown, Cape Henry, the Gettysburg, Petersburg, Valley Forge, and travel to Washington, D.C. and see some cool stuff. But our kids out here just don't seem to get that founding. And by kids, I mean adults also. We seem to lack the education and the real depth of what made this country great. And if we have time, we can get into that a little bit, because a lot of times when you hear the phrase "Make America Great Again," one is accused of being either racist or xenophobic, or when was America ever great? And there's a real simple answer to that we should all know off the top of our heads. And so we are out there teaching and preaching, and we believe, as David McCullough, one of America's greatest historians, believes, that our shared history is our greatest national treasure. And if we don't keep that and maintain it and know it and the good and the bad. You don't always, we weren't always right, but as Churchill said, he likes the Americans because after they've tried everything else, we eventually get it right. And so I'm a Churchillian as well.
Yeah, well, on my desk at Raytheon before I retired, I had a little plaque there that said, "When you're going through hell, keep on going."
Absolutely.
which,
Yeah, it's
which,
kind of like one through an ambush. There's only one way charge.
that's right. So tell us a little bit about your Freedom Expo this year and when it's going to be.
Sure. We're having our seventh annual Freedom Expo in Scottsdale, 2020. It's going to be March 6th and 7th. We are doing a combined or shared Freedom Expo with the SEAL Veterans Foundation. And so part of our mission statement is preserving the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. And I could add at home or abroad. And so we feel that it's part of our mission statement to help out some of these veterans that are have retired but still have lots to give, that are patriots, that are like-minded, want what's best for the country, don't give a darn about politics, but give a darn about this country doing well and want what's best for the United States,
Right, whoever's running it.
whoever's running it. And so we feel they're a part of our mission statement. So we're going to do that with them. We're going to have some active duty SEALs, just friends of mine, retired people. We're going to try to possibly even get Admiral Mullins as a speaker. I have a command master chief that's going to speak with us. We have Dr. Jake Jacobs coming out from Wisconsin, who's a firebrand PhD historian coming. And then we're working on another keynote. But in the past, we've had people like Dinesh D'Souza. We had Chad Prather earlier this year, which was great. And it really is getting all of us out there. And we want to become educated and inspired to action. But again, think before we act and make sure we're headed in the right direction.
Right. I mean, that sounds like a wonderful program and a terrific lineup. So,
Well, and we have the dinners on March the 6th, which will be at the Scottsdale Plaza. So that's the gala, and we give awards out. So a lot of people come up and say, "What can I do?" So we give examples of what people are doing. For instance, we gave the Freedom Historian Award to Larry Schweikert, who wrote A Patriot's History of the United States this year.
oh, by the way, we have Larry Schweikert at the Lincoln Reagan Luncheon next February down here.
Yeah, I can't, he's fantastic.
Yeah.
He knows his history and he's a patriot and he, just a wonderful man we can sit down and really have a great conversations with. We gave the Freedom Fighter Award to a friend of mine, Mike Day, who was shot 26 times in Iraq. And I'm not exaggerating, 26
I
times.
think I heard about him.
Yeah, he got our Freedom Fighter Award because he's done so much for this country, and yet he continues to give back even when he's out right now. Chun Chun, who's a entrepreneur, Vietnamese refugee in 1975, came over with nothing with her parents and her sisters and brothers, and has made herself, just an extraordinary success. And people say, is the American dream still alive? Well, look at that proof. So we just have some great examples of people around us that we can look to as examples, but also to encourage us to keep living the American dream and spread that to ourselves and the youth. That I took a class at the University of Arizona a year and a half ago. It'll be 2 years this January, where Noam Chomsky taught the class, Politics 150. And I took it, and 400 kids in there, freshman kids. And, in 28 hours of lecture, not one good thing was said about America. And the end takeaway from that class was, you're doomed. You're either going to die by nuclear holocaust, okay, because it's going to come, or you're going to die by climate change. So, get out there and raise all types of cane and tear down the system, because other than that, there's no hope. And I was like, what is the message of this? Anyway, I've got notes, I've got books and notes on his class. And it is unbelievable that a university would allow somebody like him to teach without at least a message from the other side.
Yeah.
Somebody that was more America friendly. And so
Yeah.
really, shame.
Understand. It sounds like I don't know. I'm not sure I would pay the money to listen to Norm Chusky.
No, I couldn't give that chance up.
Yeah, I understand.
Because he's now 90 or 91 years old
Right.
and still passionate enough to fight.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, guys.
Yeah.
Those of
Let's.
us who are aging,
Yeah.
look, if we're not dead yet, we need to be out there fighting the good fight because he's sure passionate about his cause. The only difference is he's wrong. And I mean, he is wrong. There are areas where he has partial truths.
Yeah.
He had a whole lecture about why capitalism doesn't work and gave examples. But when we broke up into classes, it's like, look, guys, we, broke up into little subgroups. It's like, here's examples that it did work. And what's the commonality of why it didn't? And he didn't go into that. We're just picking the bad stuff.
Right.
But anyway, somebody who was Chavez's cheerleader in Venezuela back in the day,
Mm-hmm.
and didn't believe the killing fields happened and blamed 9/11 on us specifically. I think whatever he says comes with a grain of salt, but there's no doubt his message resonates with the youth and does kind of skew their thought process.
And that's not good.
It's not good. And on the last lecture, as I was walking into the class, there was somebody there handing out pamphlets. And so, I mean, there's 400 people in this class, so they were handing them out quick. But then he paused when he was going to give me one. And I was like, what's wrong with me? I'm a little older than these guys, but don't I get one? But it was the president of the Communist Party of America
Oh, wow.
handing out pamphlets to meet that Saturday. And I've still got the pamphlet. And it basically says, now that Bernie Sanders has allowed socialism to be more commonplace in America and acceptable, let's all unite, get together, and make the changes we need to change. And crazy.
Well, you remember one of John Wayne's famous expressions was, and I don't remember who he was talking about, but he said that they weren't only wrong, they were loud wrong.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we got a lot of people on that side of the fence that, and getting into the socialism thing yeah, we got to keep fighting. I mean, Jeff, Patty and I talked to a friend of ours, and you might know him. He's up in Phoenix, and he pushed real hard to fix the ballot harvesting problem 2 or 3, 4 years ago, and get it into Arizona law. Although it looks like in Pima County this past election, they pretty much ignored the law, as we're finding out. So anyway, yeah, they just did a little audit of the 2018 election, and it wasn't good. So anyway, maybe someday we can talk about that. But
that'd be great. Has there been any articles? I've actually been looking for articles on that from somebody actually admitting it or a journalist.
Why don't I send you? What I did was I was listening to Channel 13, and they do a 9 o'clock broadcast of their news on the Fox 11, right? But it's the Channel 13 crew, and it was Dan Mary's. And he suddenly comes on and he starts talking about this report about the 2018 election, and it was done by the Election Integrity Commission, which we've got some guys that are on that commission, some people on the right side of things, and it wasn't good. And then one of the things they pointed out was two big problems were ballot harvesting and the other one was verifying signatures, like provisional ballot kind of stuff. And so I called the next day. I could not find a story on it. Zero. I mean, I searched everywhere on every channel. Pardon me?
That's something.
Well, I called Channel 13 and I got a guy to help me out, and he actually sent me the transcript that Dan Mary's read, plus a link to the report on the Pima County website. So I'll email that to you.
Great.
It's the entire report. It's a several-page report. So yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff.
Well, I think those of us that are more patriot-minded, and when I say patriots, I really mean friends of liberty. I'm trying to get even away from Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal. to me, there's enemies of liberty and there's patriots. Back at the founding, the Tories or, loyalists. And really, when the revolutionaries, that means the colonists that were breaking away, when they really got their vernacular together, they said, they're not loyalists, they're not Tories, they are enemies of liberty, and captured the vernacular. And that's what we're dealing with today. That people who do not understand the founding, the Constitution, the limited powers given to the federal government, and the spread of powers, in using federalism horizontally and vertically as the founders designed it. If we don't really understand that, and you're trying to implement other things, then I don't think there's any other label but enemy of liberty until you get educated and start getting on what has made this country great.
Yeah, and Jeff, there's so many examples of that kind of tug of war between the feds and the states. Every day you see something in the news or something happens where that becomes the issue. So yeah, you're right. It's an education thing, and that's the great thing you're doing as a constitutional scholar, is teaching people about this stuff that they're unaware of. I know we had you down I told the folks we had you down to at least 2 Tea Party meetings down here, to the Sahuarita Tea Party. And
every time.
yeah, and the people enjoyed it too. I mean, it's just it was really good. Now, one of the things that came out of all that was Patty and I aren't having the meetings anymore. So that's why we started this YouTube channel, so that people can sit in their living room or sit on their bed, look at their laptop, whatever.
Ice cream.
Yeah, eat ice cream, and we can get somebody in a live interview that can stay home, doesn't have to drive all the way down here, and talk to them. And so we hope they'll take advantage. So I urge everybody, if you're on watching right now, or if you're not, because these stay up on the YouTube after we finish, subscribe to the Sahuarita Tea Party channel and click on the little bell, and that gives you a reminder when there's a live show on. So you could, if you load the app on their phone, they can watch it on their smartphone. So we got all the bases covered now. So okay, so yeah, thank you, Jeff. We are too. It's really kind of a public service effort on our part. So I'd like to get into talking about constitutional matters, and I know I sent you some notes earlier, and we talked the other day. So we can either start out with, and we're not limited to talking about these two things, but I'd like to start out with discussions on, and you talking about red flag laws, number one, Second Amendment, and the second thing would be birthright citizenship, which I found an interesting article on today, and I sent you the link to it. I don't know if you had a chance to read it or not. But,
I did not.
Okay.
I did not, but I'll still give you my view, and you can tell me if the article conflicts. But, a lot of people, I try to really be more journalistic in my approach to the Constitution, in calling balls and strikes, kind of like on abortion. We could have an abortion discussion, because I am one that doesn't believe that the federal government should be involved at all, one way or the other, saying it's all legal or all illegal, because it's part of what's polarizing the country is the power that is going to the federal government. So the ship of state lists much to the right or left, depending on who's controlling the office. In the Federalist Papers, it's written that we're going to be more influenced by our local governments, if things are run correctly, and that we'll probably be in a state of tyranny when it's time that we're more influenced by the power out of a centralized government than we are out of the states. And so one of the problems is when the Supreme Court exceeds its jurisdiction, like it did in Dred Scott, and we don't have time to go over all that, but I do, of course, just on that. When it exceeds its jurisdiction, it polarizes the country. And it's exceeded its jurisdiction on any number of cases, including, in my opinion, gay marriage and transgenders and bathrooms and Title IX issues and so forth and so on.
Obamacare.
Absolutely on Obamacare. It's kind of interesting. John Roberts' inconsistency on Obamacare and how he created something out of nothing there, but on other rulings, he's just not very consistent. So that's time for another day. But on the red flag laws, I did a podcast. I do have a podcast on iHeartRadio called Constitutional Conversations.
Right.
And I do that with James T. Harris, who used to be down here in Tucson. And we used to do a weekly constitutional conversation. Well, he's up in Phoenix now on 5:50 a.m. and doing a great job up there spreading a good liberty message. And so we do that. And I did a podcast on, the Second Amendment. And
Right.
we do have a lot of people with high opinions out there saying it never was an individual right and these kind of things. Look, it's an unalienable right that we all know is part of what is in the Declaration of Independence: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That we don't need a right from government, and the Second Amendment does not give us that right. It just restricts government's ability to infringe upon that pre-existing God-given natural law.
Right.
So none of us want the violence and this, wanton destruction of human life and the misery that it brings. But again, the knee-jerk reaction is to want to do something, and we all want to do something. We all would want this to go away, but we have to be smart about it, and we have to think, is the cure worse than what's actually going on, and what would be the causes of this?
Thus your argument about think a little bit before you take the emotional path.
Yeah, think about what the actions are. And so with the red flag laws, I kind of look at other laws that we've passed to see if they've been abused or not. This asset forfeiture laws. Now, a lot of people like these asset forfeiture laws because it lowers the bar for our law enforcement to be able to seize property just on their suspicion. But, personally, I know of a lot of issues going on there because that bar is lowered where the abuses have happened. And we're supposed to be a system that does have a due process clause.
That's right.
At the border, the search and seizure, our rights are pretty much diminished, that the Border Patrol and ICE officials and whoever, the customs agents can seize computers or cell phones and pretty much do whatever they want with them. If you look at them funny, if you say a snide comment, and they have the power to be able to control you on that. So we have to be careful of what kind of laws we want to implement. We look at the Patriot Act, in the FISA court system. Oh, and we were guaranteed that there were safety nets and safeguards.
And that didn't happen, right?
We've seen how that's abused. But how many other cases that we don't know about
Right.
are these abused? Now, look, I love law enforcement and I support them. We did a, Back the Blue rally up here, and I teach local law enforcement, the real reason of the Revolutionary War starting.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't necessarily over no taxation without representation. It had more to do with we can handle our local policing. We don't need Parliament in London with the redcoats policing us over here.
Right. We don't need soldiers in our living rooms.
Exactly. And so we need to be careful about these things that we give up. So we know that, power given is usually power abused. And we've seen that in the FISA courts. We've seen it, look at what happened in the Patriot Act with how they define terrorists. And in the clauses, if you set fire to federal land. Well, this is how the Hammonds up in Oregon got prosecuted by the federal government for trying to protect some of their land, and some of their backburning happened to get on a couple acres of federal land. And the judge that was retiring said, look, this is ridiculous, a mandatory 5 years. I'll give you 3 months just to satisfy it. He retired, and another judge came in and said, to heck with that. We're prosecuting. You are domestic terrorists. And you're going to get 5 years. Okay? Is that an abuse of power? You better believe that is an abuse of power.
Absolutely.
And anybody who doesn't is wrong. I mean, that's just a plain, and that's what got Lavoy Finicum up there.
Mm-hmm.
That's what got the Bundys up there. And that was after the Bundy case. And I don't want to go on a wild hair with that, But this matters about these red flag laws.
Right.
Because look, the BLM was instituted in the 1930s to help with the Dust Bowl, to help farmers and ranchers manage their properties and
Right.
have water and be able to pool resources. But all of a sudden, they've become, instead of a resource to our ranchers and farmers, what has been used as a tool to squash them and get them off of public lands. And we could have a whole couple hours on that.
Yeah.
How are you going to have equal sovereignty with states that are 85% federal government when east of the Mississippi they're 98%, state-owned? You can't have an equal tax base that way. So, with red flag laws, we already have a lot on the books, by the way,
Right.
of people with mental illness and this, that, and the other. But when you try to open and expand that, do we think that that will be abused? If somebody posts something like, come and take it, or, out of my cold dead hands, you have somebody like Charlton Heston saying those things, all of a sudden they're going to be reported as extremists.
Oh, of course, yeah. It's actually already happened. I read about a case today where a guy has put some stuff up on social media, and they've arrested him and put him in jail right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Where do you know which state that
I don't
was?
remember where it was, but I just read it this morning, and it was. And I don't know how I came across it, but yeah, it's. I'll find the article and I'll send it to you.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. But we're going to see how this prevention, could be worse than what's going on, and we do see that the federal government will find ways, especially when we get to bureaucrats who are not really have oversight by the legislative branch. They are giving really the power to enforce the laws as they see fit. And we have a lot of confusion out there. That's why I think it's really important to educate our local law enforcement officials about what their role and duty is, as opposed to the FBI or, federal agencies coming in and encroaching. I like what the Center for Constitutional Studies calls it, or other groups, marble cake federalism. You can't really figure out where the lines of sovereignty are, and they become so clouded and confused that who knows what's up. And we should have more of a layered cake federalism,
Right.
so we know what's going on. And if we had that, then the Lavoie-Finicum issue probably wouldn't have happened, because we had the federal government getting involved and helping set up an illegal roadblock. And again, we can go down that type of thing, but we see what happens when there's kind of conflicting roles here. And so when we go back to the red flag laws, Don, that you're talking about, how do you implement these with a due process that is fair to the people being accused? And how do we not make this, and this is an overused term, a witch hunt, go back to the Salem trials, starting accusing people of what they could do. And I think we saw that in a Marvel movie where
Right.
they were going to execute all the people who had the tendency to maybe be aggressive or not obedient,
Yeah.
to the central command, and therefore save the nation. And that's not what we're all about.
I don't, did you just see where they were bickering up in the legislature, not the legislature, but the school, the state school board, I'll call them, what to do with the money that was appropriated by the legislature to spend for school safety. They didn't have a good plan, so they were going to delay it till next year. And a lot of people were up in arms about that because, people want their kids safe in their schools. So, so they've worked out this new plan now. And one of the things they talked about was paying teachers to be trained in suicide prevention. Now, seriously, I really think that's inappropriate. I can't see a teacher
talking down a mad shootist.
Yeah,
Well,
seriously.
if there's any evidence of the mad shootist taking time to be counseled as they were coming through the
Right,
door.
right.
I mean, if that's kind of their frontline charge, you can tell there's not a lot of thinking people at the top.
Yeah,
And they've had a lot of time to think about this.
yeah. Oh yeah, they've had more than that time. There is some money for SROs, school resource officers, which is good. We have in the whole town of Sahuarita right now. Just to let you know, we have school resource officers. We have one in each of our high schools, and that's all we have in the whole district. We have no others at any of the elementary or middle schools. I call them junior highs, but the new vernacular is middle school. So anyway. Yeah, there's virtually, and I continually communicate with our school superintendent to, don't be afraid, Manny, step out there, if there are teachers that will volunteer to protect the school, let them do it. Let them arm themselves and protect the kids because, as you said, seconds count. When that person gets through the door, you don't even have 60 seconds to do anything. You've got to react. Our police chief, I sit down with our police chief here, John Noland, and he told me, and I'm not, he said, I'm across the street from the high school and it would take me 10 minutes to get there from his office. So,
think about this, Don. I work with veterans.
Right.
And how many of these guys still want to give back?
That's right.
They're like, these guys are used to serving.
Yeah.
They're used to being purposeful. I call it sheepdog syndrome.
Yeah.
These guys are used to having work and herding sheep, and they get retired, and they're like, what am I going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Even if they don't have money, I guarantee you there's at least one retired veteran that is qualified with small arms that volunteer once a week to come in and be a guard to that middle or elementary school.
Sure.
Without even pay.
Yeah.
They do it.
Yeah.
And it would be just fantastic.
Yeah.
What a great nonprofit to start for somebody, to get out there and recruit all these veterans who are trained and have that done. Maybe I should give Ducey a call because this is like a no-brainer. I know we could get those volunteers.
Sure.
And then maybe what you could do is like the old Palo Verde Hospital here did with mental patients. They had a one fully paid staff member to create a whole army of volunteers and get out there and do the work, adopt a young brother, a young daughter, a sister or something like that.
Absolutely.
And I'll bet you'd have veterans coming out of the woodwork. You could put them through a training, a retraining thing once a year that anybody'd love to go to.
Sure. Yeah.
And look, we just talked about that. That's not something I thought about before. And I think it's a decent idea. Why can't these guys with time, effort, and money be able to figure some of this stuff out?
Yeah, I don't know. You just sometimes wonder. So maybe you and I can get time with the governor and talk with him a little bit because I always feel like I'm just a common sense person. I don't. I was an engineer for Raytheon, but there are solutions and ways we can do these things, and I don't think there's anything more important than our kids or our grandkids' safety in school. That should not be and why the teachers are so adamant to that. They're we don't want people in the schools to be armed. We don't want guns in the schools. We don't want. Well, unfortunately, you're designated a gun-free zone, and what that means to someone who wants to break the law is they know it's open season. So,
right. If we did have those trained armed veterans in every school, I think those people would think twice.
Well, you think so? Yeah.
About that.
Yeah.
So, to recap, I think the red flag laws are dangerous. I really did feel that that's the way we're headed, and I think in many states that's the way we are headed. I hope that's not the way we are going in Arizona. I would strongly discourage it. I'm against it. I think we need to come up with other ways, and I'm against it because we kind of become, an Orwellian type state of ratting on each other and kind of looking for ways to harm our neighbor. And that could become the norm, and that's a sad thing.
Well, so far, we've been able, at least we've elected people up in the state legislature that he came up with this plan a couple of years ago, and they resisted it and wouldn't wouldn't give them anything, and so I hope they hold out. So you're right, we need to work on them. So let's get into our favorite topic, birthright citizenship. I mean, I'd love to know how you feel about that one.
Well, let me, I've talked, and this is kind of one of those things, like with the abortion case. Some people hear me speak on that, that we're all about federalism. I don't want to tell Massachusetts what to do. It's kind of like healthcare. Look, if Massachusetts wants to have universal healthcare, as the French would say, vas-y, go ahead and do it. But don't make me do it down here in Arizona or Alabama or Kentucky or wherever else. That's not what we want to be getting into. Similar here, I think, with other things we've talked about. This doesn't have to do with the birthright citizenship thing, but so I get into trouble sometimes on both sides. Birthright citizenship is something I can get into trouble with, um, because there's some great books about the 14th Amendment, because this is where it comes from. The
Right.
14th
Oh
Amendment
yeah. Yeah.
was basically to solidify the Civil Rights Act of 1866.
Right. To give citizenship to the slaves at that time, once they
Absolutely.
were freed, that amendment would give them citizenship. That's what it was all about.
Absolutely. There's a great kind of the Bible of the 14th Amendment, I think is Government by Judiciary, written in 1978. And it basically is, if you want the Bible on the 14th Amendment, that is it. And I've got it in my library right here. Probably can't find it that quick. But anyway, it is kind of my go-to thing on the 14th Amendment. So, here's the thing. There were debates about birthright citizenship, just a little bit, that came up in the Senate when they were passing the 14th Amendment. But we also have to understand the context of the times. They talked, the key is this, okay? All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, okay? Subject to the jurisdiction thereof has been kind of like the focal point. So
Right.
who is subject to the jurisdiction thereof? So the Native Americans, back in the original, 14th Amendment, were not necessarily subject to the jurisdiction thereof if they were living amongst their own tribe on these reservations. But that has changed, okay? Um, and so the birthright citizenship, it is not something that is absolutely guaranteed in the 14th Amendment. Okay, that is number one. But it is the way that we have interpreted it most of our history. And so if your listeners are interested, I mean, this is really, if anybody's interested in understanding or wanting to know how one should interpret the Constitution, this is the book to read. Okay? So if you can read that, Commentaries on the Constitution of the United States by Joseph Story.
Yeah. See it perfectly.
Okay. So he talks about in this book, and he was appointed by Madison in 1812 or 13. So he was part of the John Marshall Court. And John Marshall's the fourth Supreme Court Chief Justice, supposed to be the most influential and effective of all time. And so we had a lot of our precedents there. So, a lot of the Supreme Court justices, even today, look to him how to lead and how he would, go about interpreting the Constitution. Well, he goes through Joseph Story about 12 to 15 different ways in priority of how to interpret the Constitution. And so one of those is by, hey, what's the custom or the norm? What's the custom or the norm of things? And so the custom or norm of the 14th Amendment is that if you are born here, that you become a citizen, whether we like it or not. That is what the custom or norm is. So, so I've done some presentations on this. So how do you change it? How do you change? That's the custom or norm. And is that the way the original, the framers of the 14th Amendment intended it to be?
Right.
Well, we know some of them did intend it to be that way for people who were born here, except for if you were subject to the jurisdiction of another country.
Right.
In other words, if you were a diplomat, coming
Mm-hmm.
over here.
Yeah.
if you were a spy, all these types of things.
Your loyalties are not to the United States of America.
Your loyalties are not to the United States. Now, there was a Supreme Court decision in 1898 that did confirm of birthright citizenship to foreigners that were here legally. So even if you weren't a citizen, but you were here on, now we have the green card, but if they were here as an alien resident, that if you had a child and the United States government knew you were here and you were here legally, that child was a citizen. But what it did not address was that if you were here illegally. So by custom, we have, and look, this has been changed over time by federal law,
right,
as to what we accept as a citizen or not. I mean, you go back and look through, it's times where you had to have both parents be a citizen if you were abroad, and then just one citizen. And, one parent as a citizen, one parent as a citizen that had to live here 5 years in the last whatever. And so that continuously changes. So right now, the law of the land by custom and also by actual federal statute is that if you were born here, that you are a citizen. Now, I do not think that is exactly what the 14th Amendment says, but it is how it's been interpreted by custom and by federal statute since it's been passed as an amendment. So there's there's a whole bunch of ways to do this, but I'll focus on 3 or 4. One is by executive order. Can the president say, nope, that's not what it says, we're going to change it, and this is how I'm going to interpret it?
Just to let you know, the executive order route, this article that I'm going to send you, this link, it talks about that, and it said if it has anything to do with retroactivity, it would probably be declared unconstitutional. But if it doesn't, if it just, from this point forward, an executive order probably will hold its weight.
Yeah, and I disagree with that. I'd certainly agree retroactively. Because even in the Constitution, there's no ex post facto laws.
Right.
Okay, and there shouldn't be. And I would disagree on the executive order from here going forward. I don't think an executive order is strong enough, and I think as constitutionalists, we don't want it to be strong enough. Because do we want the other side being able to unilaterally change laws? And this is why I was so against Trump's bump stock edict.
Right.
Okay. Because basically by fiat and executive order, he said, look, if the federal government or the executive branch on its own volition, on its own will and decision, can change overnight, literally overnight, something that was legal, acceptable for a person to have, and saleable, and make that the next day illegal, and you're a felon if you don't turn it in. And by the way, we're not going to pay you compensation for it. Okay, once you have that type of precedent, I use what's to say they can't, take cars that are over 250 horsepower from us.
Right.
Okay, you don't need that. That's dangerous. All of a sudden, what if they use that they want to push, electric cars, and you have an oil and gas burning car, and that's dangerous to society, and all of a sudden you turn it in or you're a felon, and by the way, we're not even going to pay you for that.
Yep.
Okay, it's wrong. And I don't care about bump stocks. I don't care.
Right.
I'm not a bump stock guy.
Yep.
But it is the point of trying to placate the masses by doing something that is not well thought out.
Right. It's an emotional response, and the bad things that can happen because of it are it sets precedent that you don't want to have. And I would comment about the Vegas. This all came up after the Las Vegas shootings, and to this date, I don't honestly believe, from everything I've looked at and read, trying to keep an open mind about it, I don't believe that guy was the shooter. I believe he was dead when the shooting was going on, and there's a lot of testimony and a lot of people that say there were other shooters. There's even one video, and there's no way to confirm this, but I've seen a video on YouTube of a helicopter flying over Las Vegas that people swear they were shooting down on the crowd. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if we'll ever know the
I don't
truth.
know enough about it, Don.
Right. I just don't know if we'll ever know the real truth. And I think that guy was a gun dealer buying, he was selling guns to somebody. They killed him. They did the shooting and left it to look like he was the guy. Yeah.
But regardless of what really happened there, which I don't know,
Right.
um, the precedent of having the executive branch, it's just kind of like Obama with Obamacare.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
What gave him
Or
the
DACA. How about DACA?
or DACA?
Yeah.
Exactly.
There's a,
Why, you know, and why can't Trump? Why does that have to go to the Supreme Court?
right. Why can't he just erase it like every
Yeah,
other president's always done?
it's just, we've gotten to the point of craziness.
Yeah.
So on one part, I don't think we want to get to the point where this can be overridden by an executive order. I think
Yeah.
if you read the book, Commentaries on the Constitution of the United States by Joseph Story, if you look at what the framers of the 14th Amendment, and I know that's what most of your listeners don't want to hear. I don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
I would
Right.
rather it be simpler to remedy because I think it is a dumb thing to be doing.
Yeah. Really
But
dumb.
because I don't agree with it doesn't mean that it's not the law of the land.
Right.
And that's something that we have to understand.
Hmm.
Okay, so an executive order wouldn't do it, and I think it would be really bad for him to do it. Now we go to the other side. Do we need a constitutional amendment? I don't think we need a constitutional amendment
No.
because I don't think all the framers were on board with some of the comments of the senators that were talking about anybody born here should be able to be a citizen. Okay, that wasn't discussed in the House, it was in the Senate. And, you kind of take things in context and time, okay, of how difficult it was to get here and who's going to want to get here and different issues like that. And we also have seen the policy of how citizenship is defined and also how subject to the jurisdiction thereof has been changed and defined through time, changed by the legislative branch and
Right.
ruled on by the judicial branch. So while I don't think an executive order needs to be done, I also don't think an amendment needs to be done, but I do think law needs to be passed by our legislative branch to change what that means in laws. And do I think they have the power to do that? Absolutely, because they already have. They've already changed subject to the jurisdiction thereof,
Right.
how they've interpreted that. They've already defined and changed natural born citizen and what that means. And so I think there's more evidence on the side of kind of the middle ground than there is on either of the extremes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we can get a common sense Congress, a House and Senate, yeah, I agree with you. That would be the way to go.
Yeah, even Harry Reid apparently, put forth some legislation years ago to try to change this. And I think it can and should be done, but who has the guts to do it?
Yeah.
We do know that the legislative branch, there is no, first of all, to your listeners, there is no co-equal branch of government. And some of the people who consider themselves constitutional scholars on TV say that all the time. And they're dead wrong. I mean, if you ever read the Federalist Papers, one knows that the founders knew and wanted and expected the legislative branch to be the most powerful,
Hmm.
to step up and make it happen. Thaddeus Stevens understood that with the radical Republicans after the Civil War. I don't care if we have a weak president and a lily-limp Supreme Court, we're going to get this stuff done.
Yeah.
And he did it.
Yeah.
And so, but the legislative branch today has taken a back seat intentionally to the executive and judicial branches because they know if they stick their head up too high, what happens? The groundhogs that stick their heads up and don't stay underground usually get shot. And I'm not saying that in a that's in a
Right.
metaphorical way there.
Sure. Of course.
They're the ones that everybody comes down on and they lose their election cycle. So it's really out of fear and self-interest that they don't tackle some of these difficult problems. And this is one of them.
Yep. Exactly. Well, that's great. I mean, I think you covered it. It's terrific. You had a little presentation ready there, Jeff, and I appreciate that. Now, what else? What other constitutional thing would you like to mention? Something before we finish here.
Well, I would. I mean, I've got a lot of things, but I want to bring up one in particular. But some of the other things was the Mueller report. We've seen to move on from
Oh
that.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
Won't
We
spend a
wanted.
lot of
Yeah,
time on that, but I got sick of people talking about it, and I've read the whole thing. I've studied the whole thing. I've got notes on almost every page of this report, and it's a sham. On pages, I'll just say on pages 143 and 144, it showed how Putin, after Trump was elected, didn't know how to get in touch with him. Neither did any of his senior aides. And it's like Mueller should have known early on there was no collusion with Russia just based on that alone. And so, if you want to save a lot of time, just read Alan Dershowitz's introduction. and and I did that first, and then I read the whole thing, and then I read it again. It's like, boy, that could have really saved me a lot of time. But it's a bunch of hogwash. It really gets me angry. And if believe me, just like on the birthright citizenship, if I felt Trump was guilty of treason, I'd say so. I
sure.
mean, I want what's best for this country, and I don't want a treasonous president in that office. I don't care who he is
Right.
or what he's doing for me.
Yeah.
There's things about racism I can talk about, federalism I had on the list. But the one thing I'd like to close with really is abortion. Oftentimes those of us that are patriots and liberty minded turn the other cheek and are just quiet because we don't want to be called racist. We don't want to be called, anti women. We don't want to be xenophobic. There's just problems, and we're quiet because we want to be nice and turn the other cheek. But there's times that we have to speak out, and being silent is really being complicit. And so I'll end on that. The abortion issue today is the slavery issue of our age. This is the big issue that can divide the nation and polarize us all. Now, there's a great argument that judo is using the enemy's weight against them, and as the left has used the 14th Amendment in equal protection to stuff down many patriots' throats, things that you got to bake a cake if somebody wants to come in and equal this and that and the other. Well, the 14th Amendment could also be used to make abortion illegal in every state, because even when Roe versus Wade was written, the person who wrote the majority opinion, and I forget his name right now, wrote, if personage could be identified earlier, then that would throw all this off, because basically the 14th Amendment guarantees equal protection to everyone that's
Right.
considered a person.
Exactly.
We know from modern science that in the old days abortion was illegal almost everywhere in Western society at quickening, which is when the mother could feel the baby in the womb move. And they were considered persons. And these women would be in big trouble if something happened. But here's why I can consider it akin to the slavery debate, as in the days of old. In slavery, if you listen to the Lincoln-Douglas debates, Lincoln considered slaves people, persons, and Douglas considered slaves property. The Southern slaveholder considered slaves property. The Northern abolitionist considered slaves people. And we are, to simplify a complex issue, it is the same thing today with abortion, is that pro-abortion advocates consider babies in the womb as property.
Right.
But those who believe pro-life stance, we believe that they are people. And so we need to cut through it all. And I realized this one day when I was reading some of the Lincoln Douglas debates, thinking about a podcast that I do with James T. And it's a very simple message that we do not believe. It's not about you don't believe in women's rights. No, I do not believe that that baby is property. I believe it is a person. And that person has rights under the 14th Amendment and everything that American society holds near and dear. We cannot be quiet. And even as I say that, I don't think that we ought to shove that down through every state's throat. But I do believe that we should shove it down our state's throat, Arizona,
Yeah.
and that we should reverse Roe v. Wade and tell the federal government to get out of my backyard where they have no jurisdiction. And this is a place they absolutely have none. And that state by state, we need to fight this fight and educate people that it is not a matter of a woman's choice and her right. It is a matter of person versus property. And I'm on the side of personhood, and I'm on the side of protecting that person, just like the abolitionists wanted to protect the slaves in the South.
Okay, Jeff. No, that's great. I love your argument there. It's a very, it's a very polarizing issue. I know that, and we're just Patty and I have just been flabbergasted at some of the, this, full term, talking about full term abortions or killing a baby after it's born and that kind of thing. I mean, we just can't believe our ears what we're hearing in some of this stuff. So
it's not a matter of opinion.
Yeah.
It is a matter of good versus evil,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what that is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Good versus evil. There's no gray area here.
No.
And that's polarizes people. But look, we need to take a stance and teach it, and at least teach it. Okay, you're a modern day slaveholder. That's, at least I know who you are.
Yeah.
Back in the day, you would have been a slaveholder.
Yep.
Okay, because you believe in property over people. Now that we both understand that, that's fine.
Yeah.
You're morally corrupt. That's your choice.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I wanted, one other thing I wanted to talk about. I don't think we have time unless you have a couple more minutes, but I don't know if you heard about Senator McSally. She wants to run back to D.C. and put together some kind of a white nationalist bill.
I haven't heard anything about that.
Yeah, well, you might go check it out, go read up on it, because I guess I think of myself as a nationalist because I believe in America and America's greatness, and if that makes me a nationalist, then I guess I am. But you and I are also white, so does that throw us into that category? And they want to throw President Trump into that category. So it's like the laws, like we have a law against murder, right? And then somebody says, well, let's call it a hate crime. Well, the person's already dead. What difference is it going to make if it's a hate crime? If the person's murdered and you want to call it a hate crime and we just want to call it murder, I don't understand the advantage of even doing that.
Well, the advantage is it gets the federal government more involved in the local issues, and so they can go back to marble cake federalism.
Right.
Instead of trying to heal, they're trying to pick the scab and exacerbate. And it's just kind of like the race issues before Obama came in office. I thought we're headed in the right direction, and then by the time he was out of office,
it was worse.
False, absolute false narratives of his administration, it got worse.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm one who rejects this racism issue. Now, look, there's a lot of racism going on in this country. There can be. But here's my feeling on the matter. If you are one who believes, as I do, that no matter what race, creed, religion, color, clime you are from, that we are all God's children, that we are all equal in his eyes of value, that, Bill Gates is of no more value in God's eyes as he is no respecter of person than some poor peasant in the fields of Vietnam, China, or Cambodia, or India, then how can you be racist? If you believe God loves all his children equally and that we all have the same eternal potential, then I reject. Now, I did another podcast on this. I reject that somebody who believes that can be a racist. Now, what I am openly is an opinionist. Okay, which means if I think you're ignorant or have a high opinion of your own opinions that aren't educated, then I'm going to think that you are not too bright. Okay. I'm going to have an avowed prejudice against you because I don't think you think correctly.
Right.
Okay. I'll freely admit that, but I will deny any prejudice based on any of those other things because, and nobody's perfect, but I think the closer we try to look at each other as God looks at us, then the less racist we can be.
Yeah.
And I think he loves us all. So I think that message needs to be spread.
Yeah.
So I happen to be a white guy. Okay. But I'm married to a Hispanic woman.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And she's for building the wall. Okay. And so when I post some things on Facebook about building the wall, you racist bigot, it must be
Oh,
because
yeah. Yeah. Right.
brown people up here. It's
Yeah.
like, look, my family's brown people.
Yeah.
I love brown people.
Yeah.
I don't care, but I'm also for rule of law.
Yeah.
So why can't you love brown people and rule of law and want a secure border at the same time?
That's right. So I was going to tell you, and we'll let you go here in a couple of seconds, but I read an article the other day that there's a councilman in the city of San Francisco. I think it was it might have been Seattle. I don't know. They're arguing about how to wash the human excrement off the sidewalks in Seattle, I think it was. And one of the black councilmen said that they couldn't use a power washer because that reminded him of the hoses that were used against blacks.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, that's the kind of, it's the kind of, you remember the general during Katrina that took over Katrina when it wasn't going very well? His name was General Oriano or something like that.
I don't really. Right
Anyway,
now.
he looked at the press and said, "Don't get stuck on stupid."
Yeah.
Right. He was really kind of the first fake news, telling them that, don't spread the fake news. But he kept telling them that every time they asked a question that he didn't like or he didn't agree with or had the completely wrong premise, he would tell them, "Don't get stuck on stupid." So, we have a lot of people, like you said, that are ignorant. They're just stuck on stupid, and we've got to get them off that.
Yeah. No, yeah. I got a lot more to say on that, but
Hey, thanks for joining us, Jeff. I really appreciate it. You're terrific, and we'll have you back. So we want to keep spreading the word about your Freedom Expo, and we're on your email list, so keep us informed, and we'll see if we can set something up in the future, because I know you like to discuss some of these things. If you have a special topic you want to get out on, let me know, and we'll get you on the show right away.
it sounds good.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Okay, thanks so much.
Everybody for listening.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
All right. Take
Good
care
night.
now. Good night.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's Jeff Utsch. Wow, he is quite the guy. Let me tell you, he does a lot of fighting for the right causes, and we're glad to have him on our team. So anyway, I'm going to take a quick screenshot of this picture, and I will take a short break, and we'll be back in a few minutes. Hi, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. And I just want to tell you about next week's show. We've got a really outstanding person coming on with us next week. We have an outstanding person every week, but boy, this is really a treat next week. It's Dr. Laura Presley, who is fighting the good fight over in the great state of Texas, and she's going to talk about election fraud. So please join us. That's next week, next Wednesday night, 5 o'clock, Dr. Laura Presley. So that's going to be a wrap for this week, and we thank you all for joining us. It was terrific. Jeff Utsch is clearly a constitutional scholar, and he knows what he's talking about. So we enjoy so much talking to him and him coming to our meetings down here, and we'll have him back. So anyway, don't forget to subscribe. Click on the little bell to get reminders of a live show, and we'll see you next Wednesday night. God bless you all. Take care, and see you next week.